So welcome to another episode of Women Rock. Today I'm joined by Marion Stewart, the CEO of Red Helix. Thanks for joining us, Marion.
Thanks, my pleasure to be here, Mark.
I think it'd be a really nice place to start, just to give everyone a bit of insight to who you are and your role within the industry, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So I am CEO of a cybersecurity company, Red Helix. I've been in the tech industry for somewhere around 30 years now. Started very technical, hands-on, and over the years have, been able to progressively manage my career and move it forward in that time with some fantastic people helping support me along the way. So don't let anyone pretend they do it all on their own. You need a supporting cast to move through your career. So I've been very fortunate in that.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. Well, I think anyone that would Google Marion Stewart would see CEO of a really exciting business inside of a very innovative technology world, interviews in Sky News, all this exciting, amazing stuff. But what perhaps people wouldn't know is how it all started for you. So I'd love to take it right back to your kind of upbringing, where you were born, and kind of the life you had before technology, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So I grew up in a very small town in Scotland, in central Scotland. So it was a very sheltered existence, if I'm honest, in terms of social experiences. I didn't have big city experience. And the town I grew up in was predominantly social housing, actually, in Scotland. So a very high percentage of social housing, and that's where I grew up in. Right, I grew up in a council estate. I'm one of six children, so a very busy and very noisy childhood. I like to think that's where some of my confidence comes from, because if you didn't, as a child, if I didn't learn to assert myself, then I just didn't get heard in amongst my five siblings. So that was a great grounding for building confidence. My family were not a family who went to university. I was the only one of six that did that. And it was, my mum was a huge inspiration in my life. My mum didn't work until her kids were growing up, but she wanted for all of us that change in our lives and to be a bit more in control of our destiny. I think she recognised generationally her generation were the stay-at-home parents. She wanted her daughters to have choices around that rather than conform to perhaps what societal expectations were. So it's fantastic. Although we didn't grow up with a lot of spare cash around, I had a really happy childhood in that setting. And I think very early on in school, I understood I had a knack for science, maths, and English, which I think was, at a very early age recognised, and something that along the way you have people that help you. You don't know what you're aiming for at that age. You come out of primary into secondary. You don't suddenly decide at that point I'm going to be a CEO. I had no idea what I wanted to do at that age, but I knew I enjoyed certain topics, and so at school I stuck with the topics that I enjoyed, and I think that was part of my success in qualifications at that time, was because I picked the things that I liked, and so I was good at them.
Do you think that shaped your desire to go to university? Obviously, you mentioned your siblings didn't take that route. Was there like maybe an early realization from your side that was the route you had to take to perhaps go and find a career for yourself? Or what was the thinking behind that? Because I imagine you tend to just follow your family or follow your siblings in a lot of sense, don't you, growing up?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's right. I think, my family, my siblings all have very successful careers as well, but they've taken different routes. And so one of the interesting parallels I often draw is university isn't the only route to achieving senior roles in business. My sisters also have very senior roles in business. They didn't do the university piece, I suppose the equivalent now of what we would call the T levels, where you actually work in industry and gain experience and qualifications alongside work. But yeah, for me, because of the background that I was building and the skills that I was building, particularly in maths and science, university was sort of a logical choice for me. And actually, the teachers that I had at the time were very encouraging in that sense. So, you know, making me aware, because I had no idea what going to university meant at that point. And so making me aware of what universities were open to me, what the application process looked like, etc. The teachers in my school were fantastic in helping frame that. And so when I went home and had a chat with my parents about it, they were really supportive, and I think secretly couldn't have been prouder that I was even thinking about it. When they came to my graduation day, you know, it was evident just by the look on their faces how proud they were that you know, that I'd been able to do that. So yeah, I think, you know, the support from your parents and teachers, and again, when you're 13, 14, 15, you don't always recognise that those people are there as part of your supporting cast. And I think some children don't perhaps think, or young people don't think to ask for their teachers' opinions of, what do you think I should go next? You know, I don't have a lot of experience of the career service now, but certainly when I spoke to the career service all those many years ago, the sort of options they were putting forward were very much the traditional professions. And being a female, it was very female-oriented profession. So, you know, go and be a nurse, go and be a primary school teacher, go and be a paramedic, those kind of things. There was nothing around, you know, aspirational technological type roles. So I think asking teachers for me was quite a revelation, and the input they gave was really helpful.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. And I don't think that happens enough in the space. And whether that's more proactive role from teachers or people in that environment, or perhaps it's maybe slightly more led on the students, because you obviously went out your own way to go and find that out.
Yeah, and I think there's also a bit more of, you know, career showcasing. I think we've got slightly better as an industry at facilitating school fairs and job fairs and things like that schools attend. But I suspect there's still a cohort of children or young people who miss out on that for lots of reasons. Maybe they're not in an educational setting, they're homeschooled, or, you know, there's lots of reasons why children and young people might not be plugged into those events. And I think as an industry, we've got to do better at showcasing the vast range of careers that are available. You know, when I was at school, I used to think of technology roles as coding. Actually, probably only about 20% of roles are coding. There's a much wider cohort of career choices and career paths that exist in the technology sector, and I think we need some you know, enhanced role model availability to help children and young people understand that.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And when you come to kind of university, and I read a book recently called The Trading Game by a chap called Gary Stevenson, and he came from a very underprivileged upbringing and got through purely through kind of talent and how smart he was to get through to the London School of Economics. And after year one, he discovered that everyone else in his year was on placement years, and their families have helped map them out the rest of their lives. And he just thought, I do well in my exams, I can leave university and that dream job be sitting there. But the reality was very, very different. Did your thinking in terms of engaging with teachers and perhaps trying to get guidance for your career continue through university, or what was the trajectory from university into your career?
Yeah, you know, I think it was very different at university. I think the student-teacher relationship, I felt, was a bit more distant, I guess, because they've got a bigger cohort and it's a bit more transient. But what I did do was build a network of friendships that I pulled into me. And we sort of figured out, and it's because I've got quite an analytical mindset anyway. I thought, who would I want to go and work for was the first question I asked myself. And so then I was able to narrow down, okay, here's a list of, if I want to stay in Scotland and I want to work in this sector and I want a company that looks like this, I was able to narrow down who I would target. And I just bombarded them, if I'm honest, until I don't know if I bombarded them into submission. But I sort of took it on myself. And maybe that comes from growing up with a sibling family of 5 others. As I mentioned, you just keep going until you're heard. And I was very fortunate and very persuasive with what was an American startup who were opening in Scotland, a company called Wang. And I have to say that being able to get into an American company early on in my career was phenomenal, because what the investment that they put into nurture and growth of students was just fantastic. And again, I think there's a lot that UK companies could learn from how you nurture young students in their early career paths. I don't think university prepares young people for coming into work. We almost need a work readiness part of every degree course that young people undertake, because it's a bit of a culture shock, I think, coming out of university into work.
Yeah, 100% agree. You smile at your story, actually. So I joined recruitment from hospitality management when I was 23, and I went through the interview process. I hadn't heard back for 3 or 4 days, and I was getting very disgruntled with my current employer. And I just rang them and said, look, I was really set on this job. If I haven't got it, can you just let me know? So I need to start looking for a job because I'm not happy here. And they said, we're waiting for you to chase us. And I would never have considered that, even at the age of 23, that was something that a sales business would do or something similar to that. And the fact you had that emotional intelligence at student level to go and make those applications, you must have been standing out head and shoulders above the rest of the market. And I kind of gather what you're saying in terms of that competitiveness for your siblings to be heard. But I don't think that's probably, like you said, teaching schools, or perhaps people wouldn't have the awareness that that's possible. I think they'd actually think it'll fall in your lap if you look after yourself and do well.
Yeah, and I think now, the advent of social media, and don't get me wrong, I think there are some very positive influences of social media and the online platforms that young people engage in today. But I also think there's an art that we are losing as a result of long time spent in that, and that's the simple art of conversation. And so having the confidence to be able to either call someone up and say, look, I've sent you 3 letters and I've heard nothing back. Can someone please just speak to me? The confidence I had to do that, I think now, if I reflect on the social experiences that young people have through social media, texting, everything's done online. I see it with my own children. Everything's done online. So how there's a question for us is, how do we build the confidence level back into that conversational space, to lift the confidence levels to be able to do that? But if there's one piece of advice I would give to young people today, is don't sit and wait for something to happen, because without you actively pursuing whatever it is you're trying to nail your future on, it's only you that's going to make it happen. Yes, there's a supporting cast around you, but be persuasive and be persistent in your pursuit of it, because that's what will get the breakthrough that you're waiting for and that you deserve.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. And look at your career now. Obviously, you've got into the tech industry. You've done a really good job of climbing the ranks. Anyone kind of look at your LinkedIn profile and see those steps. I think now, while we're still not there, I think the acceptance of people from diverse backgrounds is much better in the industry. But what was your experience kind of over those years of firstly being a woman in technology, but also perhaps seeing what other people are experiencing that perhaps weren't represented very well within the space?
Sure. I mean, I've been very fortunate through my career in that I would say, bar none, the leaders and managers that I've worked for have been a huge part of my supporting cast. They've been willing to invest their time to help me grow my skills and competencies. They've been willing to invest financial support in terms of external training, coaching, learning. You know, in my 30-year career, I've never stopped with my learning and development processes. And so that's been fantastic. I've been really lucky. However, in that time, I have experienced, you know, times where being the only woman in the room is a real challenge. You know, I've had the scenario that a lot of senior women have had, where people assume you're there to take minutes or get the tea and biscuits or whatever. I would say that was, you know, 15 years ago. I haven't had that certainly in the last 10 years of my career. So it's definitely changed. It's definitely changed a lot. I think the thing I think of a lot, and particularly, so the space I work in, and you'll see this on my profile, is around private equity. And I think, you know, if you go back 10 years ago, private equity was dominated by male leadership. And I think over the last 10 years, that's taken a real change in terms of the diversity that they have across the private equity sector. And I think that is also helping females on their journey to lead private equity-backed companies. So it's not perfect, but I think it's a lot better than it was 10, 15 years ago. I hear some real horror stories from females who, you know, have had experiences of leadership that have been the complete opposite of mine. And my coaching to them is, put yourself in control of the situation. If something isn't working for you, don't stay there. Equally, as you're going into an organisation, be confident to ask the questions. You know, what's your view in terms of, perhaps if you're the primary child carer, you need some flexibility on hours, for example. Ask those questions up front. What are your policies on things like that, so that you do the diligence on the way into an organisation, not once you're in there. And I think picking the right organisation is what will help you on a faster trajectory with your career.
Yeah, I really like that. Okay, excellent. And now we get to Red Helix, the CEO of Red Helix, a PE-backed cybersecurity kind of MSSP, if you like. I think there's a perception within kind of smaller organisations, certainly not small, is that giving back to the industry or supporting the wider kind of nation in terms of doing the right thing is a real challenge to the space. And my example is always Softcat, because I think they're an absolutely phenomenal business in how they represent themselves and also go above and beyond to make sure they're doing the right thing. But the rebuttal I get back is, Mark, they're a £2 billion business. They can do all these amazing things. They've got specialist people in different areas of the business that purely focus on that. Our margins, our profits aren't as steep as theirs. We can't go out and do that. The reality is Red Helix are doing it, so there is no excuses. I'd love you just to talk through a few of the initiatives you're running at the moment to highlight what's possible and perhaps give some practical advice around how other businesses can do the same.
Sure. So yeah, you're right. There's a few things that we're doing around our local community. One is we work with the Bucks Business First. So our office is based in Buckinghamshire, and we work with Bucks Business First, and they sponsor every year Bucks Business First careers fair, and we go as a sponsor to that initiative. And so we send a couple of our people, you know, one from the SOC, so different career people, along to that event. It's 2 days a year, and I think it costs about £1,000. So the sponsorship is pretty minimal. But in those 2 days, we get in front of about 4,000 school children from Buckinghamshire. And we go with a laptop and some technical games for them to play. And it's competitive, so we've got a leaderboard, and so we've built quite an interactive, engaging set of things, all through open source coding. We'd be happy to share with anyone that would like to mirror that in their community. We'd be happy to share that. So that's one thing we do, and that gets us in front of lots of children talking about the things that we do. And that cohort of children is both primary and secondary, so it's quite a large age group. The second thing that we've done is we've launched, it's what we call our coding club, but it goes way beyond coding, actually. We target it at year 5 and 6 kids in primary, so sort of around the age 10 and 11, and it's a 6-week after school club. And we run that for 3 or 4 primary schools, again, around the office. And a couple of our technical guys go and run the club for the 6-week period. And it's STEM based, so there's a bit of coding, there's a bit of working with manufacturing, so electronic cutting materials, there's a bit of design work, so you've got to draw and measure, and it's really about getting children to have a practical understanding of why STEM subjects matter. And the reason we target it at year 5 and 6 is so that as they go into secondary, they'll hopefully go with a bit more of an understanding of how STEM is applicable in real life. And there's 2 cohorts of the 6 weeks that we do. So one is they get to make a light box with their name and they program it to do all sorts of flashy light things. And then the second one is drone sequencing. So they get to program drones. And it's fantastic. The kids love it. And it's actually, there's as many girls as there are boys sign up, which I think is fantastic. We target those programs specifically at schools that service socially underprivileged areas. And the way we did that is we worked with the county council, and there's a premium that schools get where children from socially underprivileged backgrounds attend. It's called the pupil premium. And it just helps the school support underprivileged or socially underprivileged children more. And so we targeted those schools with high pupil premium ratios in the sense that then we're targeting children from socially underprivileged backgrounds. And the reason we wanted to do that was because my kids, like your kids, Mark, probably hear about all of this stuff from us. They get opportunities to speak to other children from middle-class backgrounds, and they learn so much in that cohort. But children from backgrounds like my background don't have a cohort to speak to around that. So that was why we specifically targeted those types of schools. And, the schools love the programmes. In terms of funding, it costs us about £800 a year in terms of the equipment that we buy to so that the kids can take stuff away with them. And
so
again,
you're in contact with hundreds of children every year, and so far up until initiative, you spent £1,800, and that's it.
Exactly. And selfishly, I hope that these kids go away, decide to take a career in technology or marketing or cybersecurity or something like that. And as they come out of university in 9-10 years time, I want them to have Red Helix in their minds as a target employer, right? So yes, it's a great thing to do, but even if they don't, our sector needs more. It needs a higher number of people to enter it as a sector. The other thing we've done is career change initiatives. So we work with some of the boot camp providers, and when we open entry-level type positions in our SOC, we'll often bring in career change people. So we've got a female in our SOC. She came in from nursing, and she did her boot camp and then came and joined us. So I just think having that type of diversity and social awareness is really important.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can't believe the cost. Like you said, the output in terms of hours from your employees isn't huge either, is it? Like, that is really viable for every business over 10 people to do.
Absolutely. For 6 weeks, they're at the schools for about 3:15, runs for an hour, and then they're back in work. So, it's about 90 minutes a week for 6 weeks for a couple of people. It's not massive.
Yeah. And the empowerment of that for all those students is absolutely huge. I absolutely love that.
Yes.
I can obviously tell you're really passionate about kind of social mobility, and I grew up just off the cusp of kind of Buckinghamshire, and Buckinghamshire is really odd, I think, because there's hugely affluent areas of Buckinghamshire, and there's other areas that are complete other end of the spectrum, and it's probably a really good case study for someone or something to assess that area, because even a matter of miles can make a huge difference. And obviously, you growing up in kind of social housing and now kind of working within the Buckinghamshire space, I read a stat in The Guardian that social mobility is the worst it's ever been in 50 years, which just sounds absolutely astounding, bearing in mind the times we've kind of come from. What's your overall take? And I appreciate it's quite a big question of social mobility at the moment. And you've obviously highlighted a few things we should be doing already, but what more can we do as a country to stop limiting people, if you like?
That's a great question. I think for me, I think things like the career service has a big role to play in that. I think it needs a big refresh. I think some schools don't know what they don't know and need help from industry to showcase the possibility. My daughter's school, I said to my daughter, let me come speak to your school. They were having careers days. She was in primary school, primary 2 or 3 at the time. And she'd gone to her school and said, my mum will come, she's CEO of a company. And the response she got was, well, that's not really a career, is it? We've got firemen, policemen, nurses, doctors, dentists. So I think there's more that the industry needs to do in terms of helping the school staff. And I have to say, the work that we've done with those schools that I mentioned in the coding club has really helped them, not just with the children that are participating that are volunteering to come along to the after school club, but the narrative and the chit chat around the whole school about the technology as a potential career spot is fantastic. So I think helping raise the advice and availability, ease of access to that information, getting it in front of children and young people is really important. And I think helping them understand that coming into the tech industry isn't about sitting coding unless you want it to be.
Yeah, I'm glad it isn't, because I've been in a lot of problems recruiting this space, but I know that well, so that's good. I've been in the industry since kind of 2016. I think diversity became a bit of a buzzword, if I'm honest with you, in the early days of me being in this space. And complete honesty, I didn't really know what it meant. I kind of naturally lent towards gender, but obviously we've touched on kind of social mobility and a variety of different backgrounds that people may come from. The one that's probably still, I would say, underrepresented in this space in terms of discussion is neurodiversity. And I think cybersecurity is probably a bit more of a market leader in terms of being a bit more acceptant, because they're utilising perhaps the traits of people that have got a really neurodiverse kind of state, if you like. What's your experience been with that? Have you had much exposure to that? Like, how can you welcome people into Red Helix?
Do you know, it's a great point. Again, neurodiversity is something I feel really passionate about. I think there is a whole cohort of talent in young people. If you look at the rates of diagnosis, there are so many young people now going through diagnosis of ADHD, etc. Getting a diagnosis is hard. The wait time in most counties, there's a report done recently actually, waiting times are about 3 years. If you think about children coming up to their GCSEs who are undiagnosed and therefore don't understand their condition and how to perhaps get themselves through GCSEs, because neurodiverse people learn differently from neurotypical people. So I think there's a whole piece that needs to be done to help educate the industry to embrace neurodiversity as part and parcel of how they think about diversity in their recruitment strategies. And we've adopted things like one of the young people we were interviewing for coming into the business. He found it very difficult to come to a place that he'd never been before. So we sent him a brochure with pictures of the office, pictures of the people that he was going to meet. We said to him, bring either a teacher or your mum along with her and along with you. And so I think there's some learnings in the industry of how do you make it comfortable so that when you have neurodiverse people sat in front of you, you're getting the best of them showing through in an interview process. And I think that's a really important thing to think for companies to think about. And we've made a lot of adaptations. We've trained managers on how to do those kind of things. We also do schools outreach, so we offer schools placements over summer for some of the secondary schools, and we offer a couple of places for neurodiverse students to come in as well. And the same process that we put in recruitment, we put in place for those secondary school students, because again, you don't want them coming out of school at 16, 17 thinking I can't do anything. And I suspect that's where a lot of them end up. So I think as an industry, we've got to up our game in learning how to elicit the best outcomes during interview processes and make it easy for that cohort of society to come into our industry. Because again, in my experience of people that we have in the SOC, having that different way of thinking will absolutely spot something that neurotypical people aren't looking for.
100%. My best friend growing up was autistic, and he couldn't speak to a shopkeeper until he was maybe 17 or 18. He's gone on to get a master's in criminology, and it's fascinating to watch his journey. But the way he approaches situations or how he views things that are completely different to me is unbelievable. And I think particularly in an area like cybersecurity, where outside the box thinking or different approaches is so valuable, I'd imagine it could add a completely different capability to your business, can't it?
Absolutely. And you know what? It really, the sum of the two are greater than either would be individually, is my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. Red Helix now. So I think one aspect that I have a lot of conversations with a lot of kind of business owners is around kind of PE funding. And I think some have got an aspect of fear towards it because they think that's going to drive huge revenue numbers, or they're going to have lots of external pressure to go and deliver something they're perhaps not doing. But what's your experience been with it? Because you've obviously done it in several different businesses. Like, is it quite a good empowerment? Is it kind of more pressure? Or what should the feeling be towards looking at external support?
Yeah, it's a great question.
It's
a great question. I've worked around private equity for, the last 15 years in my career. I'm sure there are examples out there that perhaps haven't gone well, but that's not been my experience. I've always seen them as, every single one I've worked with has been a champion for the business that they invest in. Yes, they have high expectations, of course they do, but actually no more so than you would have if it's your own business. But I think what they do is challenge you to think broadly about where growth comes from. They challenge you to think about your strategy. Is it the right strategy? How do you continue to evolve a growth mindset? How do you continue to drive a culture and a positive brand image around the business that you're leading? And how do you make sure that you take everyone along on that journey with you in a way that's positive for all those involved? So it is hard. I'm not going to sit and pretend it's easy. There are high expectations, but I don't think it's any higher than the expectations you would have of yourself. And actually, I've always found, from private equity, having private equity sat on your board, challenging you is helpful, because it's a bit like the conversation we had a few minutes ago. Not that I'm saying private equity is neurodiverse, but they're almost like having a conscience on your shoulder, constantly questioning. They're not questioning, they're getting you to question yourself. Are you doing the things that will enable growth of a business? And that's good for everyone. So yeah, my experience has been very positive, and I think the investment helps you do things. You know, we've invested currently at Red Helix, we're backed by LDC, Lloyd's Development Capital. You know, we've invested massively in building out our SOC here in Aylesbury. We've put in some very solid foundations around IT systems that clients would expect you to have if you're delivering the critical services that we are. It's hard to make those kind of investments if you don't have private equity sat behind you, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing. I've got one final question for you, Marion, and it's going to be a bit of pressure, this one. If you could give every kind of employer within the tech space one message to improve either social mobility, maybe build a more diverse workforce, what would that message be? Like, what would you encourage them to do?
Encourage them to think about how they can plug into the community that they operate in. It doesn't take a lot. We've offered, and the offer's out there for any company. Get in touch if you wanted to run a mirror of the coding club. We'll give you all the collateral content, bill of materials. But if tech companies can think about how they can raise the game in their community, think about, you know, the impact of 50 of those across the country, or 100 or 200 or 500 of those across the country. You can see how that would make a big difference in social mobility overall, right?
Yeah, 100%. Amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's been really, really insightful, and I look forward to seeing everything you guys do in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time, Mark.